Welcome to Team All Blacks, a series of reflective interviews of some of the great names of New Zealand's rugby past. Today's interview is with Sir Brian Lochore, one of the great names, one of the great captains, one of the great people in the New Zealand game. He tells his story and reveals that when he played his first Test match in 1963, it was in a position he'd never played before. Sir Brian, you had an interesting start to your career, 5 years coming through the grades, developing, and then being named at number 8 in the All Black team to go away in 63, 64, but you'd never played in the position.
No, I played everywhere else except hooker during my career from being a little fellow, but no, I had never played number 8. I'm so pleased that they did actually take me as number 8.
Did anybody ever explain the rationale to what made them actually come to that conclusion?
No, I never did find out why or how I got there. I know I was the last one out when they announced the team. They went through the locks where I had played a little bit, flankers where I played in the trials, and I thought, well, I'm home on the farm because, and then at number 30, at number 8, I got announced, so it was a bit of a shock.
So what about the adjustment to playing the position? Was that easy to cope with?
Well, it was, because it suited my game absolutely perfectly. I was reasonably good on the line out, I suppose, but reasonably tall for number 8, and I had done a lot of line out stuff. I really enjoyed the I suppose working with the halfback. It's a sort of the pivot of the whole team. You're between the forwards and the backs, and it suited me perfectly. And
of course you had an experienced halfback on the tour in Kevin Briscoe, but a young guy and Chris Laidlaw. So they're both very good halfbacks. Yes. Monkey had been around a fair while. Towards the end of his career when he went there, he was the vice captain, and Chris was sort of in my category, I suppose, a young player. Yeah, and of course your early introduction to the pressure on the All Blacks with that Newport game.
Yeah, that didn't help me a lot. I was lucky enough to get the first game on the tour, and then the third game was Newport, and it was a very poor team performance, and I guess the young guys in that particular match suffered a little bit afterwards in terms of getting, major games. So, yeah, it wasn't an ideal start to the tour, but it taught me a hell of a lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you did have a chat with John Graham about not getting a lot of play and getting the warning to be always ready because the chance might come.
Well, yeah, I started to wonder whether I'd done something wrong, because I was getting about one game in every 5, and when you're training all the time, you need games, particularly when you're on tour. You weren't doing much fitness work around like you would at home around the farm. So, yeah, I started to wonder whether my form was that bad or whether, I'd annoyed somebody. So late one night, when we'd had a few beers, I said to John, have I done something wrong or was my form bad? He said, no, he said, you're going well. He said, I only had 2 games in the first 8 in South Africa in 1960, and I couldn't believe that, because when you're a young guy looking at the hierarchy, if you like, he was definitely one of the senior players, and I couldn't ever believe that he'd gone through the same, period like I had. And you wouldn't believe it, a week later I was playing a Test match, so that was quite remarkable.
Now that's an interesting statement in itself, because that was interesting, playing your first Test match. You didn't get a lot of warning. It's a bit like Brian McKechnie a few years later when he played against Wales on the morning of the match.
I was going to go and have a game of squash with a friend of mine in London, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning. I was just outside the lift as Winneray went past, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm just going to have a game of squash. He said, you better go back to your room, we might need you. And I'm going, well, I never trained with the team. And of course I went back to the room, and I was luckily enough rooming with Keith Nelson, who had actually trained in that position during the week, and his parents rang up because they knew that Walker wasn't playing. and I could hear him on the phone talking to his parents when I went back to the room and saying, well, yeah, I think I probably will be playing because Walker's been ruled out. I've been training with the team, and you know, he put the phone down and looked at me and said, oh, why are you here? And I said, well, I told him exactly what had happened. And then the phone rang, and it was Frank Kilby, and our manager, and he said, oh, you'll be playing. And I said, oh, I've got a bit of a cold. He said, you'll rise above that. Boom. The phone went down. So that's, you know, from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, that's how much time I had to get ready.
So no time for nerves or anything, really? I suppose your focus...
Probably, and I probably didn't. Yeah, I was confident in being the fellas around me, you know, with Tremaine and John Graham. They're pretty experienced players, and they were pretty, you know, helpful, of course. But no, I didn't have time to get nerves, really. And
everybody talks about the first test going so quickly. Did you find that? Because it was a particularly good performance on that tour, wasn't it?
It was a good performance. Yeah, I think the first part of it goes quickly, but the second part takes a while. You start looking at the clock. You know, you want to avoid looking at the clock. It doesn't seem to go very fast in the second half.
Okay.
Yeah.
But happy memories of your first test?
Oh, well, I mean, you could not be more excited than having your first test at Twickenham, which in those days was the home of rugby, really.
It was an interesting, when you look at the choices in that team, a lot of young guys were taken on that tour. The selectors and a lot of well-known players were left home, and there was a bit of controversy about that. But the selectors certainly took a punt for the future, didn't they? And it paid off in the longer term.
I think definitely. Certainly by the time we got back there in 67, you know, the McRaes and Davises, Laidlaws and Curtins and those guys who were all young fellas like myself were very mature and played outstandingly well in 1967.
Of course, going back from that and taking a look at the captaincy of Winare on that tour, how much did his style affect your approach later on when you were appointed captain?
I don't think I ever wanted to be a Wilson Winare. I didn't ever. There were certain things that he did, probably off the field and on the field too, yep, that I did copy. But you know, you've got to be your own man. And I had a bit of practice at captaining Wairapa Bush. Oh, well, it wasn't Wairapa Bush in those days, it was just Wairapa. So, and my club side, of course. But no, you just got to do what you think is right. I was very fortunate. I mean, I never ever anticipated or even wanted to be a captain of the All Blacks. I just wanted to be a good All Black.
Yeah.
So getting the captaincy was a hell of a shock. You know, I was probably, in my view, about fifth in line. So it was an enormous shock. But the senior fellows that, you know, I respect so much came, and each one of them individually, and said, you know, well done, I'll support you 100%. And they did. And that was, you know, you're a fool not to use the skills of players who've probably been around longer than you. And I'd like to think that I did use their nous and their skills, but at the end of the day, you're the one who calls the tune. You have to wear it if you get it wrong, and you know, you make the decisions. But quite often we discuss things.
Did Fred ever discuss it before he made it public that he was going to make you captain with you?
I can't recall that happening.
Yeah.
I don't think that he did. If you know, it wasn't something that really I can remember too clearly, but I'm pretty sure he didn't.
But early on, you did get some helpful advice from Charlie Saxton about your team talks.
Yes. Oh, Charlie was just a wonderful man and a wonderful leader and a great manager. And yeah, well, I'd been privy to many team talks in my life, and people using expletives, I suppose, in their team talks, which is rather traditional in rugby. And I thought, well, that's what you do. I remember Charlie coming to me, not after the game, but it was in the evening. I remember it so vividly. He said, BJ, you don't have to swear to get your point across. That's about all he said.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and he's so right. I never swore in a team talk ever again. I just a normal farmer. I swear at my dogs. I swear like most New Zealanders, but I never ever did in a team talk ever again.
Yeah. He's a special man, Sexton, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He was a great leader of men, and one of the beauties of having Fred and Charlie there was that they absolutely respected one another. Fred absolutely respected Charlie because he was a little general, and there was a bit of rank there. And he was also a very good judge of players, and a manager was part of the selection panel when you were on tour, and he was invaluable in that role. Where other times when you had managers with very little experience, they're still members of the selection panel, and it makes it a little more difficult, I suppose, if they're not really au fait with the type of players you need.
Yeah. Just taking a step back, when you came back from the 63, 64 tour, it was 2 years before you got back in. Were you a bit disappointed in that you weren't able to take your
No,
career
not really.
forward?
The next year was, I think they only played Australia, and it wasn't a great series anyway, from a New Zealand point of view. And quite obviously, a lot of the players were very tired,
Yes. including
including myself. And so, it didn't worry me unduly. I think I was playing okay, provincially. So, I obviously had to have a big dig in 65.
Yeah, which of course there was every attraction to dig deep because it was South Africa.
It
Yeah.
was indeed.
And memories of that series?
Oh, we had a very good team. The forward pack stayed the same the whole series, we rightly beat them. But we were a bit slack in Christchurch. I think we got something like 17 or 18 points up in about that many minutes, and we were cruising, and we should never have cruised.
Yeah.
And they came back and whipped us, really.
Yeah. An important lesson?
Oh yeah, we're never going to let it happen in Auckland, and we didn't.
No.
No.
And as you say, it was a great pack. Players like Ken Gray sort of came into their own, didn't they?
Oh, we just were solid all the way through. Red Conway on the flank as well. Tremaine. Yeah, no, we what was great about that pack, and probably 2 or 3 years after that, was that we absolutely trusted one another. We knew how people are going to react in every given situation, and people put themselves in a position to assist, or you knew what people would do in a tight situation. And so great packs are made of confidence in one another, and we had a lot of ability there as well.
Yes. And of course, after 65, you had the rare situation of another 4-test series against the British Lions, who haven't gone down that well in history as one of your more formidable teams. But a few close goes in there.
Oh yeah, Wellington was a difficult test, but no, we didn't. They weren't a great side.
They couldn't seem to settle on a team.
But I think we were.
Yeah.
I think 66 was as good as we got, really. 65, 66,
yes.
67. But the 65 and 66 were very similar in terms of the people in the team.
Yes.
I think Walker Nathan came in for Red Conway, and Jack Haslett came in for Wilson. Otherwise, it was pretty much the same team.
Yeah. And then, of course, comes first of all, this Jubilee Test against the Aussies, and then the trip to Britain, because the South African tour had been cancelled. Were you upset that the South African tour was cancelled?
I think it wasn't a big deal at that particular point. I think we all agreed that no Maoris, no tour.
Yeah.
I think most New Zealanders felt like that, and so the fact that we were going to England or the British Isles and France was a reasonable compromise, I think.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, if we'd have taken the 67 team to South Africa, we had a very good test team in 67.
Yes. At what stage did Fred say to you that this is what we're going to do and we're going to move the ball a bit more than what we're used to?
Well, right at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, he indicated that he wanted a 15-man game, which absolutely suited us all. I mean, our greatest strength, and still is, in my view, is the forward's ability to run with the ball. And that's, you know, looking forward to the World Cup, which is just round the corner. That's where our point of difference is going to be, if we get a point of difference.
Yeah.
Is having 8 forwards with the ability to run with the ball and pass.
Yeah.
And you know, it suited us just perfectly. We had great runners with the ball who probably had been a little bit restricted by the tactics previously. And, you know, it was all about, are you prepared to run to the wing and have a ruck out there? Well, yeah, we'll run there, but we often ran out there. We didn't have a ruck. We got an impasse, you know. So it was great rugby to play in.
And it was certainly well appreciated by the British as well, wasn't it?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I think they did appreciate what we were trying to do. Well, it was probably ahead of time a little bit.
Well, I was just going to say, Carwyn James and John Reason both later identified that tour as projecting rugby to the masses in a way that had never happened before. Yeah. Did you feel like you were leading the way at the time in a type of change in the game?
Never thought about it. I suppose we definitely were.
Yeah.
We'd moved through the 50s where, you know, you just sort of went up and down the touchline, and we were deliberately spreading it as wide as we could. But again, it's about confidence in the people that around you, and confidence in the coach. I mean, you know, he drove us to play that sort of game, which we enjoyed.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that happened, of course, with the selection of the side was the dropping of McWillimon and Fergie coming in. But Fergie just fitted in beautifully, didn't he?
He did. I mean, that was a surprise. But Fergie was a magnificent running fullback, and yeah, it suited him perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were other elements that grew. Of course, Earl Curtin came back
Yes, he did.
Played significantly.
He had gone through a pretty low patch after 63, and he realised that if he ever got another chance, I think the words he would say is that I'm never going to muck up again, and he didn't. He was absolutely superb on that tour, but so was Bill Davis.
Yes.
I think just about every time he went for a gap, he made it. He was absolutely outstanding during that tour.
Bryan Williams was another one who tends to be overlooked at times, but yet he was the terrier loose forward, wasn't he?
Well, the reason he played so well was that we could handle most packs with 7, and we let him rove. That was a deliberate tactic on our part. And Tremaine and Kirkpatrick became the guys. Sometimes they could go as well, but if things were a bit tough up front, they would come back and help us in the tight. But Graham Williams was, you know, it was a deliberate ploy on our part to make him or leave him loose, so that, you know, he was going to be first to the ball.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned Ian Kirkpatrick there. I mean, this was his first tour, but you could see early on that there was some class there.
Yeah, it was a great story. Because he was selected as a number 8, and the first test on that tour was against England, so I deliberately gave him, you know, an English Test jersey, and we swapped it or something. I don't know, because I felt a little bit sorry for him, you know, having to be sort of second fiddle, I suppose, to me, and knowing how good a player he was. But it didn't last long. No. he got a few caps on that tour as well, so it was great, really. It was the start of his great career.
And the other situation of interest in that too was the halfback situation, where you had the traditional halfback in Chris Laidlaw and the runner and Sid going.
Well, it gave us a massive point of difference. Yeah. Don't worry, Laidlaw could run too. He's a beautiful passer, and he had a good combination with Earl, of course. They'd played together for a long time at club rugby and provincially. But Sid was just a magnificent runner with the ball, and he took the loose forwards away. I think the back, although he didn't pass quite as well as Laidlaw, it was okay. It was efficient, and Charlie Saxon actually helped him a great deal on that tour because he had been a halfback and a very good halfback as well, and he showed them how to make the run better, even better if you make a choice. You're going to pass or you're going to run, one or the other, not sort of have a look and then decide. And it made him a better halfback as well.
Two things that probably stand out on that tour were Colin Meads' ordering off against Scotland, and also the finish against the Barbarians. With the Meads situation, what was your immediate thought when the referee told you what was going to happen?
I just couldn't believe it. I didn't see it at all. I was at the bottom of the ruck and I got up and here's the referee pointing for Pinetree to go off. Pinetree went a few metres and I obviously asked the referee what was going on, and Pinetree came back and he wasn't going to change his mind. But I think it really Tremaine and I caused that.
Did you?
In a roundabout way. Well, I was marking the Scottish captain, and every time there was a line out, he'd either push me or pull me down, or so I warned him. And I said, well, I wouldn't do that, and so we threw one to me, and Tremaine hit him in the breadbasket, and he went down, and of course couldn't breathe, and the ref never saw it. Tremaine was well away by the time the ref had a look around. So I went over, and he knew what had happened, and he knew why it had happened. So I've sort of been very sympathetic to him, as you did.
Yes.
And I think the ref didn't know how it had happened, and he got a little bit flustered. And it was only about half a minute after that Colin came through. Obviously, I mean, I've seen many replays of it, and he never went for that guy at all. He went for the ball, trying to kick it out of his hands, which is, totally legal. But the annoying part from our point of view was that Chisholm came into our dressing room and said, look, you didn't do anything to me. I'm very sorry that this has happened. And but the hearing just about destroyed Charlie Saxon. It wasn't a hearing. There was two of them and one of us, or one Charlie.
Yeah.
And we had to send him away for a couple of days just to, he was destroyed with the outcome of the whole thing. The process, I think they used Colin as a means of tidying up their own problems over there if they had problems. And it was sad. It was a very, very sad occasion.
On the field, you've still got several minutes to play. How did the players react, and what was your motivation in making sure they stayed applied to the task?
Oh, well, you just got to put it out of your
it's hard,
head to a degree, and we had to cover them. I can't remember. I suppose I probably went into lock if we had a scrum after that. We probably did. But we were a good enough side to overcome that, I guess. But it was a shock. It was absolutely, hard to believe.
And then I believe you almost came off the field and found out that you didn't have the chance to do the Grand Slam because Ireland had decided the All Blacks couldn't visit.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shame from our point of view. A Grand Slam hadn't been done before, and here we had a great opportunity to do it. So, yeah, we missed out on that.
Yeah. Mm. And of course, you had the grand finale in the Barbarians game. It looked like you were going to lose your unbeaten record.
Oh, we were very close to losing, and several things I remember very vividly in that game. I think they had a really fast Olympic sprinter on one wing, and I can't think of it.
It was a Jones.
Yeah, well, definitely a Jones. He was definitely a Welshman, and I think twice he got away, and Fergie, he'd beaten Fergie, and he only had to pin his ears back, and he would have scored. But Fergie yelled out, "I've got you," and he almost stopped, and like a good dog, sat down and waited for him. But so we twice we got out of jail, really, and then, well, we did play well in the last five or 10 minutes, but it wasn't a good game from our point of view up until then.
Yeah, but you had your own hand in things with the fielding of the
Yeah, that was probably fortunate. I went back into that hole because I could see he was going to kick over the top, and he did. Perfect.
That's just experience, though, isn't it? No,
Well, I think you
intuition.
got, yeah. It's about trying to put yourself in their position and say, what are you going to do from here? And there was a bit of a hole there. You know, you've got your fullback further back outside your backs, and the winger was on the, you know, marking his man on the side, so it was a logical place for him to go.
Yeah. And of course, you're cheered off the ground by teammates and fans.
Yeah, I don't remember too much about that. I'm just pleased that we overcome them in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a good finale to the tour.
Was there a sense of satisfaction once the tour was over that you'd been able to play the rugby the way Fred wanted it played?
Absolutely. I mean, we enjoyed the type of rugby we were playing. We had players that could play it, and yeah, a very satisfying tour. Yeah. And well led, you see, well managed. We always knew that Charlie was, you know, so stable up there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you come back and then you're off to Australia, and you managed to break your hand or a wrist in the first test.
Yeah, I broke my thumb and pulled my hamstring and broke my thumb at the same time. So clearly there was no point in staying. I stayed on for a little while, just because we weren't going too well. The Aussies were giving us a bit of stick, and I thought, well, I'll stay until we settle it down a little bit, and then you know, I'll go off, which I did.
And of course, that was the first game in which a replacement was allowed.
That's right,
and he did rather well.
My replacement came on and scored 3 tries or something. So you know, I was lucky to ever get back in the All Blacks again.
But of course, you did get back in against the French in a very bitter series at times.
Well, I you know, obviously didn't play in the first test, but I played in the second test, and that was a bitter test. It was very, you know, they decided that they're going to kick everything above the ground that moved in case it was a ball, and we'd had I remember very vividly Fred saying to us, "You've got to just absolutely forget about what they're doing, just get out there and play the game, play rugby," and the boys were coming to me and saying, "Look, BJ, we've got to do something here. We're getting kicked to bits, and you know, we just can't be passive, you know, any longer." So I thought, well, the best thing to do was to go to the referee and tell him that if he wasn't going to tidy it up, well, I was going to let my men go, and he didn't take kindly to that comment, obviously, and. You know, I don't think he probably has a great deal of respect for me anymore. But it had to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did it sort things? Did
yeah,
things
he
get
did.
sorted?
He did sort it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, the third test was a memorable running game. They applied themselves, didn't they?
It was a magnificent game of rugby. You know, probably the best test I ever played in my life was against France in Paris in '67. That was an absolutely amazing game. It just went from one end to the other. And I don't know how many we won by, but I know they scored a try right on full time because we were all too tired to get back. You know, it didn't put us under pressure in terms of the score, but it was a great game, and so that game was in Auckland. You know, Sid Going getting a couple of tries around the short side, but they always had good backs. You know. Backs with the ability to run and play with the ball, and of course we were rather similar. So it was 2 teams playing a similar style, really.
Yeah. And that was Fred's last test.
Yeah, it was.
That must be a real regret.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Fred's team, and you know, we needed him to take us to South Africa, really.
Yeah. You did have 2 tests against Wales, which was something about.
Oh, they were good tests actually. They'd come over as the British champions, I guess, and were fairly cocky. And we gave them a real pasting in Lancaster Park. I can't recall the other game so much, or the score of the other game, but I know we had a big win in Christchurch.
Yeah, and a powerful display, probably one of the great displays by the pack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we overpowered them, I guess. But again, it was the forwards' ability to run with the ball that actually blew them away. I can clearly remember 2 or 3 occasions when we took off from quite a way out. It was the forwards that actually did the damage. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, you're building up to South Africa and the heights that you'd hoped you'd reach in '67. But preparation for that tour?
Oh, it was difficult, I suppose, but there was a lot of, when you're not actually being supported by all the people in the country, it always makes it a little bit more difficult. Yeah, we played really well in the provincial games, but we kept our bad games, unfortunately, for the test match. The first test, we'd played against most of those players, the South Africans, in the provincial games leading up to the test, and we weren't frightened of them. We didn't think they played that well against us, but what we forgot was when they put a green jersey on, how much they changed. And they hit us with everything in the first 10 minutes, quarter of an hour, and we really struggled to recover. The second test we should have won by a whole lot more. We actually played quite well that day. The third test, we had an awful second half. Just things did not go well for us, and that was probably our worst performance of the tour, really. Fourth test, we were as good as them, and I think we were pretty unlucky not to have won that.
That's when McCullum came into it in the end with his goal kick.
Well, he fly kicked 3 or 4 times when we had about 4 on 1, and he'd fly kick the ball into touch or out of trouble somehow. So it was, very frustrating. And frustrating, I guess, because we hadn't been there since 60, sorry.
Yeah.
And it was an opportunity to win a series, and we didn't do it.
One thing that came out of that tour was Bryan Williams' emergence. I mean, what did you think when you first saw him unleash?
Oh, he was superb on that tour. I can't think of a game where he wasn't absolutely, perfection. Some of the tries he scored and breaks he made were absolutely superb, and he was only 19 or 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was absolutely the star, on and off the field.
And basically set the trend for a new group of kids coming through as the guy to watch. And I suppose in a lot of ways that was reflected in the rugby that was subsequently played by other players.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And come home and basically you retired. But
well, it was sort of a strange feeling. I came home and they had the English centenary in London, and they selected a World 15, which I was captain and coach of, because in those days the captain was the coach in all the club teams in England, and so that was my role. So it was quite a difficult role, really, but we had some great players. We had 7 Kiwis and I think 7 South Africans and a couple of Fijians and 3 or 4 Australians, 4 Australians I think, and 2 or 3 Frenchmen. We developed into a very good side, and it was a great tour. I think we tonged England up by about 20 odd points in their big day. So we were, and we played well, and I actually was very comfortable with my my form over there. I it was surprising, really, after having had the big disappointment in South Africa. And I came home after that, and I was wandering around, and I just didn't have enough enthusiasm to have another 4 tests against the the Lions for some reason, and I kept thinking, yeah, I can play fine, but you know, unless you're absolutely going to put your body on the line in a test match, you're not as good as you should be. And I guess that I was walking around just one day in the paddock. I don't know what I was doing, but I could show you where it happened. I just decided, no, I'm retiring from international rugby.
Just like that?
Yeah, I went home and told Pam, and she said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm just not going to play in the series. So I rang Alec Vasey. He didn't ring the selector those days. Well, he didn't ring the rugby end. I rang Alec Vasey, who was a great mate of mine and an absolutely respected journalist.
Yes.
And said, Alec, I've got a story. Well, I didn't say that I had a story for him. I just said that I just want to tell you I'm retiring.
There was one more game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you regret that in hindsight?
Not at all.
No.
I don't. A lot of people have said to me, why did you do it? Because you ruined your record or your reputation. I said, I'm a New Zealander. They were in a very deep hole for a lot of reasons, which was explained to me when they rang up on Friday lunchtime. And had nobody in New Zealand ever heard that story, I wouldn't have played. But I knew damn well that people would find out that I had been asked to play, and I turned it down. I turned my country down in a moment of need. That wasn't what I wanted to go to my deathbed on with. So I didn't have any problem. Once I made that decision, I played. I played okay. I was fit enough to play a test match. I certainly didn't have any time to, I never trained with the team. But yeah, we didn't have, it wasn't a good performance by the All Blacks at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It was a poor performance, and I was in that team, and people think that, well, some people think that I shouldn't have been there, but yeah, I didn't ask to be there. I was there. I gave what I had to give, and I have no regrets.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about my reputation. I'm worried about my country.
And that's probably a good point to end there. So thank you very much for that part. And we'll come back in a few moments and talk about the coaching career.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.